the genetic genesis and the forbidden timeline. We are a species with amnesia. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a cold, biological and archaeological reality. We stand on a planet we claim to own, using technology we think we invented, yet we cannot explain the very foundations of our existence. Modern science tells us a comfortable story, that humanity crawled out of the mud, spent hundreds of thousands of years as primitive hunters, and then, suddenly, and without warning, invented writing, mathematics, and monumental architecture in the deserts of Mesopotamia. But the math doesn't add up. The timeline is broken. When we look at the Great Sphinx of Giza, or the towering pillars of Göbekli Tepe, we aren't looking at the works of primitive man. We are looking at a mirror into a past that has been systematically erased from our collective memory. Somewhere in the deep fog of prehistory, there is a missing link, not of bone, but of civilization. A golden thread that connects the gods of the Sumerian tablets to the genetic anomalies in our own DNA. Today, we peel back the layers of the great lie. We go beyond the textbooks to ask the forbidden question. Who were the architects of humanity? And why did they leave us behind in a world we no longer understand? Slow zoom into a dusty 5,000-year-old clay tablet. In the mid-19th century, in the ruins of the Library of Ashurbanipal, archaeologists discovered something that should not exist. 30,000 clay tablets, written in the sharp, angular script of the Sumerians. While the world expected to find ledger books and grain receipts, they instead found the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, the oldest stories ever recorded by human hands. But these were not myths, they were technical manuals. The Sumerians claim they did not invent their civilization. They say it was handed down from the Anunnaki, a term that translates literally to those who from heaven to earth came. According to these records, the Sumerians were not the first masters of this planet. They were the inheritors of a legacy that stretches back 450,000 years. The Sumerian king list is perhaps the most haunting document in human history. It lists kings who reigned for periods of 28,800 years, 36,000 years, and 43,200 years. Mainstream historians dismiss these as metaphorical numbers. But why? If a culture is accurate enough to calculate the 25,920-year cycle of the precession of the equinoxes, a feat that requires observing the stars for thousands of years, why would they suddenly become poetic and inaccurate when recording their own history? The truth is far more uncomfortable. The Sumerians believed they were created for a specific purpose. They describe a time when the Earth was a mining colony. The Anunnaki, facing a labor crisis in their quest for gold, a metal they needed to save the thinning atmosphere of their home planet, decided to create a primitive worker. They did not create us from nothing. They took a pre-existing creature, a hominid already roaming the Earth, and mixed it with their own essence. In the tablets, this is called the breath of life. In modern science, we call it genetic engineering. For decades, biologists have searched for the missing link. We are told that we evolved naturally from Homo erectus. But there is a problem: the Great Leap Forward. Roughly 200,000 years ago, the human brain didn't just grow, it exploded. It doubled in size and tripled in complexity in a window of time that is, evolutionarily speaking, a blink of an eye. When we look at the human genome, we find human accelerated regions, HARs. These are segments of DNA that remain stable for millions of years in primates, but suddenly underwent massive changes in humans. Even more startling is chromosome 2. In every other great ape, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, There are 24 pairs of chromosomes. Humans have 23. For decades, this was a mystery. Then, genomic mapping revealed the truth. Our chromosome 2 is actually the result of two separate chromosomes being fused together. But this wasn't a messy, natural accident. The fusion site is precise. It contains telomeres, the caps of chromosomes, in the middle of the strand, where they shouldn't be, and a centromere that has been deactivated to allow the new, longer chromosome to function. It looks like the work of a master programmer. It looks like an edit. If the Sumerian tablets are correct, we are a hybrid species. We are the clay of Earth, fused with the blood of the stars. This would explain why humans are so poorly adapted to this planet. We suffer from back pain because we aren't perfectly evolved for Earth's gravity. We are the only species that gets sunburned easily. We are the only species that feels a longing for the heavens. We are a biological paradox, a sophisticated software running on primitive hardware. Drone shot over the Sphinx as the sun rises. If this genetic intervention happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, where is the physical evidence of their cities? The answer lies in the Great Reset. The most iconic monument on Earth, the Great Sphinx of Giza, holds the key. For a century, Egyptologists have claimed it was built by Pharaoh Khafra around 2500 BC. But the stones tell a different story. In the 1990s, geologist Robert Schoch stood in the Sphinx enclosure and noticed something that changed history. Vertical water erosion. The Sphinx is carved out of the bedrock. The walls surrounding it are limestone. On those walls are deep, undulating vertical grooves. In geology, these marks only have one cause: thousands of years of heavy, torrential rainfall. Here is the problem. Egypt has been a bone-dry desert for the last 5,000 years. To find a period where Egypt experienced enough rain to cause that level of erosion, you have to go back to at least 10,000 BC, to the end of the last ice age. This means the Sphinx was already ancient when the first pharaohs arrived. They didn't build it, they found it. They repaired it. They carved their own faces onto a much older, much larger lion statue. But why 10,000 BC? This date coincides perfectly with the Younger Dryas period, a time of global cataclysm. Science now confirms that around 12,800 years ago, a comet, or a series of fragments, struck the North American ice sheet, causing a literal global reset. The ice melted instantly. Sea levels rose hundreds of feet in weeks. The world was plunged into the Great Flood, described by every culture on Earth, from the Bible to the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh. The civilizations that existed before this, the Golden Age cultures, the builders of the Sphinx, were wiped clean from the map. Their cities were buried under hundreds of feet of silt and ocean water. We aren't the first advanced civilization. We're just the first ones to wake up after the disaster. Part 4. The Sentinel of the Stars, Göbekli Tepe. If the Sphinx is a geologic clock, then Göbekli Tepe is a message in a bottle. Located in modern-day Turkey, this site has shattered every paradigm held by mainstream archaeology. Before its discovery, we were told that 12,000 years ago, humans were nothing more than nomadic hunter-gatherers. We were supposed to be struggling for survival, yet here we find a massive temple complex, featuring pillars weighing over 20 tons. What makes Göbekli Tepe truly haunting is not just its age, which predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years, but its deliberate burial. Around 8,000 BC, the people who used this site didn't just leave, they spent weeks, perhaps months, backfilling the entire complex with thousands of tons of clean dirt. They turned a temple into a mountain. Why? The pillars are carved with precise reliefs of vultures, scorpions, and foxes. But archaeoastronomers have decoded these symbols as a star map. Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone, appears to record a catastrophic comet strike, the same impact that triggered the Younger Dryas cataclysm. They weren't just building a church, they were building a time capsule. They knew a darkness was coming, a great reset, and they buried their knowledge deep within the earth, hoping that a future version of humanity, a version with a recovered memory, would one day dig it up and understand the warning. The South African gold mines and Adam's calendar. Satellite view of the thousands of stone circles in Mpumalanga, South Africa. The Sumerian tablets say the Anunnaki came for gold. If this is true, we should find ancient mines. In the mountains of South Africa, we find exactly that. Scattered across the landscape are hundreds of thousands of circular stone structures. For years, they were dismissed as cattle kraals, built by local tribes. But a closer look reveals a shocking level of technological intent. At the center of this complex lies Adam's calendar. It is a circular arrangement of stones that is perfectly aligned with the north, south, east, and west cardinal points. But there is a catch. To align it perfectly today, you have to account for the shift in the Earth's axis over tens of thousands of years. Calculations suggest this site is at least 75,000 years old. Even more incredible is the acoustic resonance. The stones themselves are made of dolerite, a rock that rings like a bell. When measured with specialized equipment, Adam's calendar emits high-frequency sound waves and electromagnetic fields. It isn't just a calendar, it's an energy portal. It sits at the intersection of ley lines, the Earth's natural energetic grid. If the Anunnaki were mining gold here, they weren't using shovels and picks. They were likely using sound and resonance to extract the ore, a technology we are only now beginning to rediscover. Part 6. The Forbidden Artifacts. Out of place and time. Artifact, like the Antikythera mechanism or a precision-cut granite block. If humanity's timeline is a straight line of progress, then out-of-place artifacts, UPARTs, should not exist. Yet they are everywhere. In the coal mines of the 19th century, miners found gold chains and iron pots embedded in coal seams that were 300 million years old. In the mountains of Russia, researchers found nanospirals, microscopic metal coils made of tungsten and molybdenum, metals that require temperatures of 3,000 degrees to forge. These were found in soil layers dated to 100,000 years ago. Then there is the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. It is an analog computer with bronze gears so complex they wouldn't be seen again in the modern world until the 18th century. It could predict eclipses and track the movement of the 5 known planets with near-perfect accuracy. These artifacts are the glitches in the matrix of history. They prove that high technology is not a 20th century invention. It is a recurring phenomenon. We are simply the latest civilization to play with the fire of the gods, unaware that previous versions of us have already burned the house down. Part 7. The Star Shafts and the Great Pyramid Power Plant. The internal chambers and shafts. We return to Egypt, to the Great Pyramid of Giza. We are told it was a tomb for Khufu, yet no mummy, no inscriptions, and no funerary art were ever found inside. What we do find are the star shafts, narrow tunnels that point directly to Orion's belt and Sirius. But there is a more radical theory. Look at the materials. The pyramid is encased in white Tura limestone, an insulator. The internal chambers are made of rose granite, high in quartz, a piezoelectric material, and the structure once sat atop an underground aquifer. When water flows through limestone and vibrates quartz, it creates electricity. The Great Pyramid wasn't a tomb, it was a global power plant. It used the Earth's own seismic and hydraulic energy to broadcast wireless power, much like the towers Nikola Tesla would try to build thousands of years later. The golden capstone that once sat atop the pyramid wasn't just decoration, it was the final component of a planetary energy system. When that capstone was removed, or destroyed in a cataclysm, the world went dark. Humanity fell from a state of high-tech connectivity into the amnesia of the Bronze Age. Part 8. The Proselenes, the people before the moon. A dark, star-filled prehistoric sky over a primitive mountain landscape. There is no moon, only the Milky Way glowing intensely. If we are a species with amnesia, perhaps the most shocking thing we've forgotten is the sky itself. There is a persistent, haunting legend scattered across the globe, from the highlands of Greece to the indigenous tribes of Colombia, that speaks of a time when the night sky was empty. The ancient Greeks referred to the Arcadians as the Proselenes, which literally translates to those who were before the moon. Aristotle, the father of logic, recorded that the territory of Arcadia was inhabited by a race of humans long before the moon ever appeared in the heavens. This isn't just a stray myth. It appears in the works of Plutarch, Apollonius of Rhodes, and even in the oral traditions of the Chibcha people in the Andes. They speak of a great flood that was triggered by the sudden arrival of the moon, which stabilized the Earth's orbit, but at the cost of a global cataclysm. Is it possible that the moon is not a natural satellite? Modern science confirms the moon is an anomaly. It is too large for our planet, its orbit is nearly a perfect circle, and it is significantly less dense than Earth. In 1969, when the Apollo 12 lunar module was crashed into the surface, seismic instruments recorded that the moon rang like a bell for over an hour. This suggests a hollow, or at least highly structured, interior. If the moon was placed there, by the same architects who edited our DNA, it serves as the ultimate governor of Earth, controlling our tides, our biological cycles, and perhaps even our consciousness. The Sumerian tablets mention that before the Anunnaki achieved the perfect human, they conducted many failed genetic experiments. They created beings that were imperfect, some with multiple limbs, some with strange blood requirements, and some with vastly elongated heads. This brings us to the Paracas skulls of Peru. For years, skeptics claimed these skulls were the result of cranial deformation or head binding. But medical analysis has proven this impossible. Head binding can change the shape of a skull, but it cannot increase the volume or weight by 60%. These skulls are missing the sagittal suture, the seam that connects the two parietal bones of the human skull. You cannot bind a suture out of existence. Side-by-side comparison of a human skull and a Paracas skull, with medical labels pointing to the missing suture. Even more chilling is the legend of the first vampires in Serbia and Eastern Europe. While pop culture has turned them into monsters, the original accounts describe something biological. Peter Pagoitz and Arnold Paole weren't just folklore. Their cases involved government officials and medical doctors who witnessed bodies that did not decay, and blood that remained fresh weeks after death. If the Anunnaki were experimenting with longevity and blood-based essence, these vampires may have been the biological cast-offs. Creatures with a modified genetic code that allowed for extended life but required external biological input to survive. We call them monsters, The ancients called them the unfinished. Part 10. The conclusion of Chapter 1. The Master Script. A fast-paced montage of Göbekli Tepe, the Sphinx, a DNA strand, and the moon, all pulsing to a heavy cinematic beat. We have travelled from the clay tablets of Mesopotamia to the genetic laboratories of the stars. We have seen that the missing link is not a fossil, but a signature left in our very cells. The evidence is overwhelming. Humanity did not simply happen. We were designed, and our world was terraformed by a force that operated on a timeline of hundreds of thousands of years. The Great Sphinx stands as the guard of this secret. Göbekli Tepe is the warning. The pyramids are the abandoned machinery of a high-tech era we can barely comprehend. We are currently living in a period of low consciousness, a fog induced by a global cataclysm that nearly wiped us out 12,000 years ago. That the amnesia is starting to lift. A modern person looking up at a digital screen displaying ancient cuneiform, their eyes reflecting the code. But if we were created as a worker species, what happens when the masters return? Or worse, what if they never left? What if they are watching from the bell that rings in our night sky, waiting for us to once again reach the level of technology that led to our last destruction? To understand the present, we must look deeper into the places where the light of the sun never reaches. Because the true history of our species isn't just buried in the sand, it's buried under the ocean. The ghost civilizations of the abyss. The greatest library on Earth is not in Alexandria, nor is it hidden in the secret archives of the Vatican. It is at the bottom of the ocean. For over 10,000 years, the rising tides have served as a blue shroud, covering the ruins of a world that existed before the dawn of recorded time. We are taught that the sea levels have been relatively stable throughout human civilization, but this is a lie of omission. At the end of the last ice age, during the meltwater pulse events, the oceans rose by more than 400 feet. Millions of square miles of fertile coastline, the very places where humans always build their greatest cities, were swallowed in a geological heartbeat. What we call the beginning of history in 3000 BC is actually just the moment humanity finally reached high ground and began to dry itself off. Today, we dive into the abyss. We go to the places where the sonar reveals right angles, 90-degree streets, and massive stone monuments that should not exist. If Chapter 1 was about our origins in the stars, Chapter 2 is about our forgotten home beneath the waves. Underwater footage of murky green water, suddenly revealing a massive, straight stone wall covered in silt. In the year 2001, the National Institute of Ocean Technology in India was conducting a routine survey for pollution in the Gulf of Cambat. As their side-scan sonar swept the ocean floor, 120 feet below the surface, the monitors didn't show the jagged, random patterns of nature. They showed a grid. Stretching for 5 miles across the seabed was a city. Archaeologists were stunned. The site featured a massive basement-like structure, sections of walls, a bathing area, and a drainage system that mirrored the sophisticated urban planning of the much later Indus Valley civilization. But it was the carbon dating that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. A piece of wood recovered from the site, bearing the marks of human toolwork, was dated to 7,500 BC. This date is a death blow to mainstream history. In 7,500 BC, according to the textbooks, humans were barely beginning to understand how to plant a seed. They were supposed to be living in mud huts, not 5-mile-long urban complexes with structured plumbing. This submerged metropolis is believed by many to be the legendary Dwarka, the kingdom of the god-king Krishna. According to the Mahabharata, Dwarka was a city built on the sea with walls of silver and gates of gold. When Krishna left the earth, the text says the ocean rose and reclaimed the city. For centuries, this was called a myth, but the sonar does not lie. The ruins in the Gulf of Kambat prove that a high-functioning maritime civilization existed 9,000 years ago, meaning our timeline of civilized man is off by at least 4,000 years. If you will, the oceans hide our cities, the lakes hide our temples. In 2013, researchers scanning the Sea of Galilee in Israel stumbled upon a structure that defies explanation. It is a massive cone-shaped monument made of unhewn basalt stones, weighing an estimated 60,000 tons. That is heavier than a modern Boeing 747, 10 times over. The structure is 32 feet high and nearly 230 feet in diameter. It is larger than the stones of Stonehenge and sits in a region that has been the crossroads of human conflict for millennia. Yet no one knew it was there. Geologists have confirmed that the basalt rocks used to build this monument were brought from over a mile away. This implies a massive, coordinated labour force. But why build it there? One theory suggests that the structure was built on dry land during a period of extreme drought when the lake was much smaller. This would place its construction in the same window as Göbekli Tepe. Was this an altar? A tomb for a giant king? Or was it a marker for something buried even deeper beneath the lake bed? The lack of any burial remains or inscriptions suggests it served a functional, perhaps energetic purpose. Like the pyramids, it may have been a focal point for the Earth's natural resonance, a needle in the planet's energetic skin, now silenced by the weight of the water. Gold plates with strange carvings. We move from the water to the subterranean caves of the Andes. The story of Father Carlos Crespi is one of the most controversial chapters in forbidden archaeology. For 50 years, Crespi served as a missionary in Cuenca, Ecuador. He was a man of the people, and the indigenous Shuar tribes trusted him with their most sacred secrets. As a sign of gratitude for his service, the locals began bringing him gifts from a hidden cave system known as Cueva de los Tallos. These weren't just stones or pots. They were gold, silver, and brass plates, intricately engraved with symbols that looked like a mixture of Egyptian, Babylonian, and Sumerian. One plate in particular shows a pyramid with 2 elephants at the base and a sun at the top. Elephants have been extinct in South America for 10,000 years. Another plate featured writing that was nearly identical to ancient Phoenician, a culture that supposedly never crossed the Atlantic. How did these artifacts end up in an Ecuadorian cave? In 1976, a massive expedition was launched into the Tallos caves, including none other than Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. Why would an American hero and a team of high-level military and scientific officials spend weeks in a damp cave in Ecuador? They were looking for the Metal Library, a collection of gold plates that supposedly contained the entire history of the Anunnaki and their time on Earth. When Father Crespi died, the Crespi collection mysteriously vanished. Most of it was bought by the Ecuadorian Central Bank and hidden in vaults, while other pieces disappeared during a fire at Crespi's church. The evidence was erased, but the photographs remain, proof of a global high-tech network that connected the Andes to the Middle East long before the official start of history. The Yonaguni Monument, the Japanese Atlantis. Cinematic underwater footage of sharp 90-degree stone terraces rising from the dark blue depths of the Pacific. Off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands in Japan, lies a structure that has divided the scientific world for decades. In 1986, a diver looking for hammerhead sharks stumbled upon a massive underwater formation that looked like a stepped pyramid. This is the Yonaguni Monument. Rising from a depth of 25 meters, the structure features flat platforms, perfectly straight edges, and what appear to be carved stairs and drainage channels. Mainstream geologists argue that the monument is a natural formation of sandstone, fractured by tectonic activity into clean lines. But to anyone standing on its terraces, the explanation feels hollow. There are two pillars, perfectly parallel, standing at the top. There is a loop road that circles the base. Most compellingly, there is a section known as the face, a large megalithic carving that bears a striking resemblance to a human visage. If Yonaguni is man-made, it was built when the area was above sea level. This would date the monument to at least 10,000 BC, a time when the world was supposed to be primitive. Like the Sphinx, Yonaguni stands as a silent sentinel of the pre-Diluvian world. It suggests that a Pacific-based civilization, perhaps the legendary Mu or Lemuria, once flourished where today there is only empty ocean. Drone shot over the crystal-clear turquoise waters of the Bahamas, revealing a stone road stretching toward the horizon. In 1968, a prophecy seemed to come true. The famous sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce, had predicted decades earlier that the ruins of Atlantis would be discovered off the coast of Bimini. Almost on cue, divers found a half-mile-long limestone path made of massive rectangular blocks. This is the Bimini Road. Critics call it tessellated pavement, a natural geological phenomenon. However, core samples tell a different story. Some of the stones have been found to contain microfossils and materials not native to the immediate seabed, and some stones appear to be levelled or propped up by smaller boulders. Diving deeper into the Caribbean, we find the blue holes, massive underwater sinkholes. Inside these caves, hundreds of feet below the surface, divers have found stalactites. In chemistry, stalactites can only form in dry air as water drips from a ceiling. This is physical proof that these deep underwater caves were once dry land. Even more startling? Human remains and ancient fire pits have been found at depths that have been submerged for over 12,000 years. This confirms that a coastal civilization was thriving in the Caribbean before the Great Melt turned their world into an archipelago. Part 6. The mysterious stone structure in Lake McDonald. Visual. Dark, murky lake water where a massive 1,000-pound stone is perfectly balanced on three small shims. We move to the freshwater mysteries of Canada. In 2005, while searching for a lost plane in Lake McDonald, Ontario, a sonar team found a biological and archaeological impossibility. 40 feet below the surface, they found an erratic boulder weighing 1,000 pounds. But it wasn't dropped there by a glacier. It was perfectly balanced on 7 smaller baseball-sized stones. This structure, known as a cairn or a dolmen, is a classic marker of prehistoric human activity. Geologists who examined the site were stunned. The likelihood of a glacier dropping a 1,000-pound rock so precisely onto 7 tiny stones is statistically 0. Underwater photography showing the balancing act of the Lake McDonald stone. This structure sits on a ridge that was a dry land bridge between lakes 9,000 years ago. It suggests that even in the northern reaches of America, a sophisticated group of hunters, or perhaps the descendants of a more advanced race, were marking the land with impossible stone balances that serve as acoustic or spiritual markers. Part 7. The Doggerland, Europe's sunken heartland. Visual. Animation of the North Sea between England and Denmark drying up, revealing a lush forest and river system. Perhaps the most haunting story of the abyss is Doggerland. Today, it is the bottom of the North Sea, but 10,000 years ago, it was the heart of Europe. It was a vast, fertile plain where the Thames and the Rhine rivers met. Trawlers, fishing in the North Sea, have pulled up more than just fish. They have dragged up mammoth's tusks, ancient lion's bones, and, most significantly, human tools and weapons. We have found barbed harpoons made of bone and sophisticated flint knives at the bottom of the sea. A Doggerland settlement being engulfed by a tsunami. Doggerland didn't just sink slowly. It was destroyed by a mega tsunami triggered by the Storegga slide, an underwater landslide off the coast of Norway. A wall of water 60 feet high raced across the plains, drowning an entire culture in a single afternoon. These are the refugees of the abyss. Those who survived fled to the hills of Britain and the coasts of Denmark, carrying with them the trauma of the Great Flood. This is why every culture has a flood myth, not because it was a story, but because it was a global eyewitness account. A glitch in the abyss. In 2011, a Swedish treasure hunting team called Ocean X was exploring the floor of the Baltic Sea when they encountered something that shouldn't exist. At a depth of 300 feet, their sonar picked up a massive, circular object, roughly 200 feet in diameter, resembling a crashed saucer or a colossal stone structure. This wasn't just a rock formation. The anomaly sits at the end of a 1,000-foot-long skid mark, or runway, as if it had slid across the ocean floor before coming to a rest. When divers approached, their electronic equipment, satellite phones and cameras, inexplicably stopped working within 200 meters of the object. They found 90-degree angles, internal passages, and a strange staircase leading into the structure. Samples of the material were analysed and found to contain limonite and goethite, metals that some geologists argue are not natural to this region. Is it a secret Nazi project? An ancient piece of technology? Or a relic from a time when the Baltic was a dry valley, serving a purpose we can no longer comprehend? Part 9. The Azores Pyramids, the Mid-Atlantic Marker. Visual. Satellite map of the Atlantic Ocean, zooming into the Azores Islands, showing a massive underwater pyramid shape between the islands of São Miguel and Terceira. For centuries, the Azores Islands have been a prime candidate for the location of the mountain peaks of a sunken Atlantis. In 2013, a Portuguese sailor named Diocleciano Silva discovered a massive underwater pyramid via sonar. The structure is estimated to be 60 meters high, with a base of 8,000 square meters. Unlike the jagged mountains surrounding it, this structure is perfectly oriented with the 4 cardinal points, mirroring the Great Pyramid of Giza. If this is a man-made structure, it proves that there was a mid-Atlantic culture capable of monumental masonry long before the sea levels rose. It acts as a bridge, linking the pyramid-building cultures of the Americas with those of Egypt and Sumer. It suggests that the Atlantis of Plato wasn't just a story. It was the hub of a global maritime empire that used the Azores as its final high-ground refuge. Part 10. Conclusion of Chapter 2. The Great Submergence. Visual. Slow-motion montage of all the submerged sites. Cambat, Yonaguni, the Azores, fading into a dark, watery silence. The evidence hidden in our oceans is a direct challenge to the out of Africa theory and the linear timeline of human progress. We have found 5-mile-long cities in India, 60,000-ton temples in Israel, and precision-cut pyramids in the Atlantic. These are not natural formations. They are the skeletal remains of a global civilization that was mastered by the tides. Why does mainstream archaeology resist these findings? Because if you admit that 9,000 years ago, before the invention of the wheel, humans were building urban centers and maritime trade routes, you have to throw every textbook in the trash. You have to admit that we are not the pinnacle of human achievement. We are a reboot. We have seen the architecture of the abyss. But what happened to the people? To understand why these empires fell and why some regions of our world still bear the scars of unimaginable heat, we must look at the evidence of an ancient conflict. In the final chapter, we move from the water to the fire. We will investigate the radioactive ruins of India, the lost Nazi Wunderwaffe technology, and the terrifying possibility that our ancestors didn't just drown, they were burned out of existence. The atomic past and the secret of the SS. If the oceans are the grave of our cities, the sands of the desert are the witnesses to our destruction. We have been taught that the split atom is a 20th century achievement, a dark gift from Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project. But there are places on this planet where the rocks turned to glass thousands of years before the first modern laboratory was built. There are ancient texts that describe weapons of incandescent smoke and 10,000 suns. For decades, we called these descriptions religious metaphor. But as we uncover radioactive skeletons and vitrified forts, we are forced to confront a nightmare. That the Great Reset wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a war. A war fought with technology we are only now beginning to rediscover. And in the shadows of the 20th century, one regime went further than any other to find the blueprints of that ancient power. Part 1. The radioactive ruins of Mohenjo-Daro. Skeleton lying face down in a street. In the Indus Valley of modern-day Pakistan, the city of Mohenjo-Daro sits as a silent, terrifying anomaly. Built around 2500 BC, it was a masterpiece of urban planning. It had a grid system, covered sewers, and public baths. But when archaeologists excavated the site in the 1920s, they didn't find a city that had slowly declined. They found a city that had been frozen in a moment of absolute horror. They found 44 skeletons scattered throughout the streets. These were not soldiers on a battlefield. These were families. A father, a mother, and a child were found holding hands in the middle of a road, flattened as if by a massive pressure wave. There were no signs of sword wounds or physical struggle. Even more chilling, when these skeletons were tested with Geiger counters, they were found to be highly radioactive, on par with the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The city itself showed signs of vitrification, a process where brick and stone are heated to such an extreme temperature that they melt into glass. This requires temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. How does a Bronze Age civilization produce the heat of a volcano in the middle of a city street? The answer may lie in the Mahabharata, the ancient Indian epic. It describes a weapon called the Agneya, an measurement of uncounted brightness, a rain of fire that parched the animals and made the waters of the rivers boil. We are told this is mythology. The skeletons of Mohenjo-Daro say it is history. Part 2. The Sahara Glass and the Ancient Aerial Bursts. A geologist walking across the Great Sand Sea, picking up a translucent, yellow-green piece of glass. In 1932, Patrick Clayton discovered the Great Sand Sea glass in the Libyan desert. These pieces of silica glass are nearly 100% pure and are scattered over tens of kilometers. For years, scientists tried to blame a meteorite impact, but there is a glaring problem. There is no impact crater. When a meteorite hits the Earth, it leaves a scar, a deep, circular depression and shattered, shocked quartz. In the Sahara, there is only glass. Modern physics has proposed a new theory: aerial bursts. If a nuclear-level explosion occurs in the atmosphere, the thermal radiation melts the sand below into glass without ever creating a crater. Similar glass has been found in the Gobi Desert and the Mojave. It suggests that in the distant past, our planet's atmosphere was the stage for a series of high-energy detonations. Were these natural bolide impacts, or were they the iron thunderbolts described in the Vedas? If ancient man witnessed these events, they didn't just see gods, they saw the weaponization of the heavens. Part 3. The Nazi Occult. The Search for the Vril. Black and white archival footage of Heinrich Himmler and the SS Anunnaki in Tibet. Fast forward to the 1930s. While the rest of the world looked toward the future, the leadership of Nazi Germany looked toward the first time. Heinrich Himmler created the Anunnaki, a specialized department of the SS dedicated to tracing the origins of the Aryan race. But they weren't just looking for ancestors, they were looking for technology. The Nazis believed in the world ice theory and the existence of a lost civilization, Thule or Atlantis, that had mastered a form of energy called Vril. This wasn't electricity, it was a fundamental force of the universe that allowed for anti-gravity and biological transmutation. This leads us to the mystery of the SS officer's diary and the Michaelis notes. The diary suggests that the Nazis were excavating sites in Poland and the Czech Republic, looking for ancient wells that contained artifacts from the pre-flood world. This culminated in the project known as Die Glocke, the bell. Witnesses and researchers claim the bell was a heavy metal device that used red mercury and high-speed counter-rotation to create torsion fields. It was said to cause plants to rot instantly and humans to suffer agonizing deaths within its field, mirroring the descriptions of the ancient Agneia weapons. The Nazis weren't inventing new science. They were trying to reverse engineer the incandescent smoke of the Anunnaki. Visual, high-contrast footage of the Me-262 jet, its engines glowing blue-white against the dark German sky. In the final, desperate days of World War II, the skies over Europe witnessed a terrifying leap in technology. The Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, appeared as if from another dimension. While Allied pilots were still tethered to the limitations of propeller-driven engines, the German Schwalbe, Swallow, was screaming past them at speeds exceeding 540 miles per hour. But where did this quantum leap come from? Mainstream history tells us it was the result of the brilliant mind of Hans von Ohain. However, occult researchers and whistleblowers from the Anunnaki suggest a darker origin. They believe the propulsion systems of the Me-262 and the even more mysterious flying discs seen by Allied pilots, later dubbed Foo Fighters, were inspired by the study of Vimanas. Ancient Sanskrit texts like the Vaimanika Shastra provide detailed blueprints for flying craft that did not rely on combustion, but on mercury vortex engines and anti-gravity resonance. It is no coincidence that the Nazis were obsessed with the red mercury experiments in the secret underground labs of the Riese project. They weren't just building planes, they were attempting to build god machines. The Me-262 was merely the tip of the iceberg, the only piece of forbidden tech that made it to the battlefield before the Reich collapsed. Visual: a heavy iron door in the basement of a Polish palace, swinging open to reveal not gold, but thousands of stone cylinders. The 2019 discovery of the SS officer's diary mentioned earlier ignited a global gold rush. The diary pointed to the Hawkburg Palace in Poland, claiming that 28 tons of gold were buried at the bottom of a 200-foot well. But those who have followed the trail of the Nazi occult know that gold was often a code word. What the SS truly valued was information. Under the direction of Himmler, the Nazis were searching for the tablets of Thoth, or the pre-Diluvian archives. These are the records that the Anunnaki supposedly left behind before the Great Flood, the original blueprints for DNA manipulation and free energy. According to the diary, this wasn't a treasure to be spent. It was a heritage to be preserved for the Fourth Reich. The Masonic Lodge in Quedlinburg, which held the diary for 75 years, knew that the contents of that well could rewrite human history. They didn't hide it to protect the gold. They hid it to protect the truth. If the world knew that a superior race had once been destroyed by their own technology, the modern power structures would crumble. We would realize that our current progress is just a repeat of a failed experiment. Visual, an animation of the Earth's axis shifting, transitioning into a montage of fire falling from the sky and oceans rising over cities. We have explored the amnesia of our species, the genetic edits in our blood, and the radioactive scars of ancient wars. But the question remains, why? Why does human history keep resetting? Why are we allowed to reach a certain level of technological godhood only to be knocked back into the Stone Age? The answer lies in the Anunnaki's master plan. In the Atrahasis epic, Enlil, the leader of the gods, grew tired of the clamour of humans. We became too many, too loud, and too difficult to control. The Great Flood wasn't an accident, it was a culling. We are currently living in the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and ignorance. According to the ancients, this is the final stage of a 26,000-year cycle. Every time we reach the end of the cycle, a cleansing occurs. Sometimes it is water, the Younger Dryas. Sometimes it is fire, the nuclear wars of the Mahabharata. The goal of the hidden masters is to keep humanity in a state of perpetual childhood, intelligent enough to serve as a labour force, but too forgetful to ever challenge the architects. The Nazi bell, the radioactive ruins of India, and the star-aligned pyramids are all remnants of the previous peak. We are now standing at the edge of the next peak. Our AI, our genetic editing, CRISPR, and our return to the moon are all signals that we are approaching the red line once again. Part 7. The Winged Messengers and the Unseen Hand. Visual. A grainy, black-and-white photograph of a British intelligence officer holding a carrier pigeon, transitioning to a close-up of a tiny encrypted note. While the Nazis were scouring the earth for ancient god tech, the Allies were engaged in a mystery of their own, one that remained buried until a homeowner in Surrey dismantled an old chimney in 1982. There, they found the remains of a World War II carrier pigeon, still carrying a coded message in a red capsule attached to its leg. The message, known as 40TW194, was sent to XO2, a destination that does not exist in any official military directory. For years, the UK's GCHQ and Bletchley Park codebreakers attempted to crack it and failed. Why would a simple pigeon message be more difficult to decode than the Nazi enigma? Rumours from retired intelligence officers suggest that these messages were part of a back-channel communication with something, or someone, not of this earth. As the world fought for its survival, there are signs that the hidden masters were playing both sides. The carrier pigeons were the only way to send messages that bypassed the electromagnetic ears of the Anunnaki's orbital monitors. This pigeon didn't die of exhaustion, it was intercepted. Some secrets are so dangerous that history itself is rewritten to hide them. Part 8. The activation, the death whistle, and the resonance. Visual. A 3D printed replica of the Aztec death whistle, shaped like a skull. A hand blows into it, and the sound wave is visualized as a jagged red pulse. We have spent this journey looking into the past, but the past is beginning to vibrate in the present. In the 1990s, when the Aztec death whistle was first blown, scientists dismissed it as a curiosity. But neuroacoustic studies have recently revealed that the specific frequency of the whistle, a terrifying 12,000 hertz, triggers the fight or flight response in the human brain with biological precision. It is a sonic key. Similarly, the Galilee megalith and Adam's calendar have begun to emit unexplained electromagnetic pulses, synchronized with the solar cycles. We are not just finding these sites, they are turning on. As our solar system moves into a different region of the galaxy, the increased cosmic radiation is interacting with the quartz and iron in these ancient structures. The amnesia is not just lifting, it is being stripped away by the planet itself. The species with amnesia is about to have a very violent awakening. Part 9. The final conclusion. The choice before us. Visual. A slow, epic montage of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, the Paracas skulls, and the radioactive skeletons of India, ending with a shot of the modern Earth from space. We have come to the end of our exploration, but for you, the journey is just beginning. We have seen the fingerprints of a master designer in our DNA. We have seen the ruins of empires that possessed the power of the atom and the wisdom of the stars. We have seen how secret societies have spent centuries trying to reclaim a power they didn't earn. History is not a line, it is a circle. We are currently standing where the Sumerians stood, where the Atlanteans stood, and where the builders of Mohenjo-Daro stood. We have reached the peak of the mountain. The air is thinning, and the view is clear. We are not alone, we are not the first, and we are not in control. The hidden masters are waiting. The Great Reset is a recurring event designed to keep us from ever becoming more than a worker species. But this time, we have the records. This time, we have the data. The only way to break the cycle is to remember who we really are. The facts you've seen today are the keys to your own history. Mainstream science will call this fiction, but the stones of Egypt and the sands of Pakistan do not lie. We are uncovering the truth that has been hidden for 12,000 years. If you are ready to stop being a species with amnesia and start being a species with a future, you need to join us. Hit the subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming investigation into the Black Knight satellite and the hidden base on the far side of the moon. Leave a comment below with the word "remember" if you believe our history is a lie. Your voice is the only thing that can break the silence. Thank you for watching. The truth is no longer buried. It is waiting for you to find it.